Welcome back to season 4 of Connecting with Purpose, where we're putting founders first, telling the stories of the humans behind the business. From magic moments to purpose, looking back on their entrepreneurial roller coaster to the possibilities ahead. We'll learn how these leaders have navigated their journeys up, around, and away from the performance precipice to achieve growth, results, and impact they're really proud of. Welcome everyone, welcome back to season 4 of Connecting with Purpose, where we're putting founders first, focusing on the human behind the business. And today I'm really excited to be welcoming Naveen Khugputh, who is a co-founder and COO of both Werqwise and APiRO, which together are reimagining the future of office space design and quite literally reshaping the workplace experience. Similarly to me, Naveen started out in a British bank. He spent the first of half of his career in finance and pivoted into real estate 10 or so years back, but he's worked in London, New York, Hong Kong, most recently San Francisco. And during this last chapter of his career, he's co-founded 4 different enterprises. And so it's going to be really awesome to hear from Nav today more about his entrepreneurial journey, like how he got to where he is and what's coming next. So Naveen, thank you so much for joining me today on Connecting with Purpose.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and I know it's a really busy time for you. So we'll dive right in to magic moments, and this is just literally looking back as far back as you want to go, personally, professionally. Just 3 moments that stand out to you that, with the benefit of time, regardless of whether they were really positive at the time or maybe really big challenges at the time, with the benefit of the time, you kind of score them a 10 out of 10 because of 1, how you handled it. And 2, because of kind of what the impact it had on what came next. And this, I generally ask for 3. So, like, what would be 3 magic moments that spring to mind? What was it about them made it magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call them?
I'm going to go chronological order then. So I'll go to the first. I went to business. I was really lucky to go to business school, a business school in the south of France. And when I got there, I was surrounded by people who I'd never met before, who just had incredible perspective. You know, they all felt like they were going to achieve something and have a big impact on the world, and they were from all over the world too. So for me, my kind of education up to that point was kind of state schooled and slightly narrow, and probably kind of less ambitious than perhaps these private business school kids were, and that for me just gave me incredible perspective. I also met my wife there, so that was probably the most defining moment of my life. But yeah, so so if I was to give that a name, it would be perspective. It just opened up a world of possibilities for me and made me feel that I could actually achieve a lot more than perhaps I was thinking about at the time. So that would be number 1. And number 2 magic moment. So after business school, I went into banking, as you said in the introduction. I didn't love banking. And I was in New York, and I was having a great time in New York. And, being in New York was, again, gave me great perspective. But, corporate banking, which is what I was doing, just wasn't for me. I really wanted to focus on growing businesses and helping businesses grow, a bit more from an equity perspective. And I was fortunate to join a private equity firm. So that was the next defining moment, because that was just all of a sudden dropped with no training program as a still a relatively young man into an elite environment. Yeah. And just being part of, junior part of elite teams. And watching how elite teams operate, watching how they challenge each other, watching how much kind of constructive conflict there was to drive outcomes, and how much intensity and relentlessness and pace and urgency and accuracy and all the things that I just think elite business teams are able to achieve, but without any loss of a sense of humor, and always kind of going for a beer on the Friday, so it was just a brilliant environment. So if I was to give that a name, it's good. I've never been asked that question, to give this a name. I'd probably say boot camp. It's probably
yeah, I love it.
I'd call it a 10-year boot camp or maybe a 5-year boot camp. And
that's
then,
really hardcore that you only got to go for a drink on a Friday in New York City.
Yeah. I mean, it was typically only a Friday. I mean, occasionally a Wednesday if we're having a good week. And certainly before the Friday, I feel like before the financial crisis, it might have been lunch on a Friday, and then after that, it was much more beer on a Friday.
It resonates. That's so funny. Yeah, it takes me all the way back to late 90s and early 2000s of my banking career. That was through to 2006 in New York, and but the culture changed a lot during that time, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we're going to come back to both of these. What's number 3?
Yeah. Number 3, it's hard because you said earlier that I need to market a 10 out of 10, and it's quite hard to do it for this particular moment in life. But it would be COVID, the pandemic, because for a flexible workspace business that relies on people coming to the office, that was a black swan event, completely out of our control, that nearly destroyed the business. So for me, that was career defining in that I had to build resilience in a way that I'd never needed to do before. I had to self-motivate in a way that I'd never had to do before. I'm reasonably resilient, I'm reasonably self-motivated, but this was just another level that I had to reach to. I had to raise the bar. I had to take more unknown risk than I'd ever been to, and with the private equity training, you're all about known unknowns and and understanding kind of how to take risk, and all of a sudden it was very hard to do a forecast. It was very hard to guess outcomes, and despite all that, we took the decision to open another space in San Mateo, and a big part of doing that was to get ahead of the curve and also deploy the first iteration of the APiRO technology that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. And that space has pretty much been 97% full for the last 2.5 years. The technology worked. We validated our thesis, but that could have gone in a lot of different directions, and it wouldn't have been possible without lots of other people, who also took risks and raised the bar to make that happen. But that for me was a really kind of career defining moment in terms of having to deal with something really, really difficult. It makes the rest of my career look like a one-way bet, COVID.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, what I love about these as well is how they play into each other in quite a complementary way. If you think of COVID as being the peak of the risk and resilience kind of interface, that the south of France was all about perspective, where you're with people that probably are looking at life with a bit of a broader kind of view and higher ambitions and higher expectations, just because of where they've come from and the experiences they've had, and so that opened your eyes up in one respect, and then the private equity piece kind of brought you into the nuts and bolts of performance and the like you said, the sort of the intensity and getting everything right and the support and the challenge and being able to handle conflict in a way that elevates the team forward. And you talked about this sort of elite team element to that. When you look back on those two experiences, and how they maybe shaped your approach to COVID, where you had to lean into unknown risks and you took a risk to, if you like, a bet on the technology at a time to get ahead of a curve at a time when you didn't know if your business actually was going to make it through. How did those previous experiences kind of shape that and help build your resilience for that time, do you think?
Well, I think, despite the such positive experiences joining private equity and going to, the business school, but they were both hard. Yeah. They were both hard, and they both required a level of toughness that I think really helped me in COVID. I would say particularly private equity. There was really tough times there. It's not somewhere, where there's a, like I said before, a training program, or you're treated any differently because, you're in your 20s and you've got less experience. It's just not really how that worked then. I think it might have changed now, but that worked then. So, you have to do tough things and work incredibly long hours and take on tasks that felt, insurmountable at the time you were given them. Right. And given time frames that also felt impossible, and you get to the end of it and you went, hold on a minute, I've just done something that I thought was impossible. And I think that belief really helps during COVID. So I do think they do align in terms of a journey to kind of building a character and a skill set that allowed us to get through COVID. Yeah.
And you also talked about possibilities, and how that kind of that was one of the elements around the business school, right? It's just sort of people were just seeing these possibilities ahead and pursuing them. What possibilities were you able to see in COVID in that very bleak time? And then what gave you the confidence or the belief to pursue those when you could have probably just taken the safe path and shrunk things down and hopefully rebuilt them back up again?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a funny sort of way, the good thing about COVID is you never quite knew when it was going to end. So the idea that I was thinking on a 4-year time frame in the first 6 months of COVID, I mean, it's just not. You were really trying to say, well, what can I see, and and how do I kind of deal with it and manage through that. We also saw, the opportunity that, the world of work is going to completely change. It's going to be completely upside down. And what a workspace, an office space means to people, it means something different now. It's not the have to that it used to be. It's now something that, is seen as a nice to and as a productivity tool. And that means you have to change the way offices are. You look right now, I've got this beautiful view of San Francisco that you can't see out my window. 40%, 35% of office space is empty, and the stuff that's filling is the stuff that's purpose driven. It's designed in a way to bring people together, help them collaborate, help them work better. Right? It's not just an office where you have to come to the office.
Yes.
So that's what's leasing. The rest of it is obsolete unless people spend money on it. It won't lease. So the two asset classes that are leasing in San Francisco are the best buildings, the absolute best buildings. And the flexible workspaces, because they're both purpose driven,
Got it. Yeah. And so this is a good time for just to give everyone a bit of context around both Werqwise and APiRO and how they kind of working together to transform that workplace experience. So just want to give the audience just headlines on how those two kind of companies work together, and how you are proving the value in this purpose-driven workplace.
Yeah, I think so Werqwise is a flexible workspace, and we just saw an enormous market, as others did. Most popular WeWork, of course, most well known, but for space as a service. But at the time we started the business, we saw an enormous market that wasn't really being addressed properly. For us, there's no, in what is fundamentally a hospitality business, there is no Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton in the world of flexible workspace. And equally, no one was using technology to address some of the challenges with flexible workspace. And we always intended to do that. And then funnily enough, going back to COVID, we slowed down our rate of openings for flexible workspace and spent more time on the technology. And what the technology aims to do is sustainably deliver to the customer what they want. So APiRO allows you in an office space to move walls, data, power, lighting, and change the look and feel of the space with no construction, no demolition, right? So, and therefore no environmental waste. So what it means for a co-working operator is when you have someone coming to you for a space, you can really bespoke the space to them rather than give them something off the shelf, right? And then APiRO is now being commercialized way beyond our co-working business, into the world of commercial real estate, because partly driven by COVID, what do people want from their spaces? They want them to be purpose driven. They want them to make sense as to why they're in there. They want all the amenities that you need to deliver now to have people in the space. So APiRO can help you do that. Over a 10-year, lease of a space, APiRO could save you 300 metric tons of carbon. So it's a sustainable way to continuously adapt your space. You could change it every month if you want, and it's supported by a digital twin designer, so you can design the space, and also data collection at the back end, which informs you how the space is being used. So that's how they work together. It's kind of, APiRO was designed to solve Werqwise's problems, but has now taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, and when we were catching up a year ago, that was the plan. Well, may not have been quite a year ago, but that you were explaining that plan to me, and the benefit of APiRO there, of course, is it isn't just limited to flexible workspaces. It's limited, or as in to shared workspaces and workspace as a service. It's, you can plug that into companies and any space where they want humans to get the best experience.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. So that's great context, because now what I'd like to do is rewind a little bit. Kind of just thinking back to I suppose, like, what sparked this like entrepreneurial journey for you to go from private equity to essentially to being co-founder? Was there a particular moment or something you saw, or was it more just as you were feeling a need and a drive to want to grow, like you said, grow your own thing, build your own equity, prove your own value?
I think for me it was, think about banking and private equity. You are privileged to work with incredible entrepreneurs, and you watch them operate and you watch what they build and you support them along the way. And I always felt somewhat that, you know, as the investor, you know, you can kind of celebrate the wins and celebrate the exit, but you're essentially like the, you know, you've won the Super Bowl, but you didn't get on the pitch.
Yeah.
So for me, I wanted at some point in my life to try and be, you know, the man in the arena.
Yeah.
And see if I could build something. And, you know, when I left private equity, I started by kind of being an active angel investor and working more closely with startups, because I certainly didn't feel private equity had kind of set me up to enter the startup world. You know, obviously there's plenty of transferable skills, but it is different. So I started just actively investing and kind of co-founding, if you like, the sort of passion project. So an education company, a sports related business that makes sports hardware for big brands. And that kind of almost kind of stepped me into having the confidence to then work with a couple of the co-founders on something as big as Werqwise. Yeah. And try and do that. So it really was, you know, wanting to scratch that itch at some point, you know, feeling like if I didn't have a go, I'd regret it, and wanting to see if I could be the man in the arena. And Werqwise has certainly put me in the arena over the last few years.
Well, and then so let's talk about the journey in the arena. You know, you've been in the arena, obviously had some incredible growth. I'm sure there's been some pain points and some challenges along the way, and COVID obviously was a massive one. When you're looking at that from the perspective of you as the human, what are some of the challenges that you faced in the business? You know, what drove them, but then what did you have to do to readjust your focus, or how you were showing up for the business, or maybe just to step back and get perspective? Like, what's that been like for you in sort of navigating some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, from a leadership perspective with the team, so I like the word showing up. You're having to do quite a lot of different things in the different cycles. You know, when we first, you know, both all my co-founders and I were based in Hong Kong. And we took the decision to start the business here, move our families here to San Francisco. And, you know, what better place to be an entrepreneur than San Francisco? So at first you had to kind of establish a little bit of credibility, particularly with the team, because you're essentially kind of fresh off the boat and, you know, didn't really, know too much. And, you know, then you're delivering positivity, but you're also, you know, building. And literally in our business, we're literally building. I mean, it's construction, you know, so we're literally building the plane, you know, whilst it's in the air. And, you know, we had magnificent growth at the start, and, you know, we were really looking to kind of replicate things at pace. And then the pandemic hits, and all of a sudden your leadership style has to completely change. You know, it probably became a bit more of a bottleneck at that point in terms of, and what I mean by that, you know, very much about ensuring that everyone else felt okay and felt safe and felt like things were going to be okay, whilst kind of above the bottleneck, you were looking at, existential challenges and having to navigate them, so that was slightly different where, I think my natural side is to kind of share everything. I felt during the pandemic, particularly because I couldn't actually articulate a clear solution as to how we're going to get through it at certain points. I became a bit more of a kind of, I'll just have that all here and you guys can kind of get on with what you're doing and I'll support you to do that. And obviously with APiRO, we've got this technology project that people can kind of pivot to and work on, and that was really exciting. So yeah, we're definitely with the people, it was a challenge, and has taken kind of different approaches. And now we're back into growth mode. Now we're in kind of almost restart your engines, let's go. So it's gone full circle really, in terms of how I've had to kind of show up for people in the business, and obviously that takes a toll on yourself, right. Particularly if you're kind of not in a position where you feel sharing every detail of everything is going to help people do what they need to do. You're kind of keeping a bit to yourself, and that always takes a toll on people, I feel.
Yeah, and I mean, I've shared a couple of articles with you recently on this thing I call the performance precipice, and that's specifically. It's not just for founders, right? I mean, any team leaders, any individual contributors can get there. But the point is, it's a place where, like on the outside, everything looks really pretty successful. Like you're doing such an awesome job, but because of what you've been focusing your time and energy on, and the fact that you're on probably like a treadmill that's kind of continuing on a never-ending incline, you inside. You're just feeling a bit empty. It sounds like you probably haven't necessarily gotten there yourself. I mean, if you have, correct me and explain what led to it and how you got away from it. But if you've somehow avoided that, and certainly adapting leadership style is a good way of avoiding it. If you have avoided it, what are the things you've done that have enabled you to avoid it? So you've either navigated away or you've been able to avoid it. How do you think you've been able to do that, and what's it look like if you got close?
I think when you get to a place where you feel on the verge of burnout or being overwhelmed or stuff. I mean, for me, it's kind of just reprioritizing and saying, right, what is my North Star? Why am I doing this? As a natural kind of catastrophizer, I'll write down the catastrophes. When you write those down, you realise, like for the catastrophe to happen, it's a long road. There's a lot of road that needs to travel, right? So this is kind of well written about, but definitely doing that. I think celebrating small wins is important for me. I'm a natural celebrator, so I feel like getting the team together and celebrating the small wins always just kind of brings back a bit of energy. There's a lot of with burnout and reaching that precipice, as you call it. It is about how do you find more kind of authentic energy again. Not energy where you're kind of putting on a smile before you walk into the room type thing, but just genuine, authentic energy. And I think people can tell the difference, especially if you're in a small startup team, because you spend so much time with each other. You really know that. Prioritizing relationships is a big one for me. I'm a huge people person. I have a pretty large group of close people, like say larger than your average person. I have kind of 30 best mates. You know what I mean? So going around them, and then the one that I continually fail on. I can see by your background, you're much better at it than me. Is exercise. I mean, exercise is just a gift, isn't it? In any time of stress or burnout or so I think that always helps. That exercise helps you do the other stuff. Yeah,
and I mean that is a brilliant menu. There's one I want to double click on, and it might then tag us into kind of talking about purpose a little bit as well. But you put this as a question. It's a brilliant question. How do you find more authentic energy?
Yeah, and but I think it's different for everybody. I think that's a question you need to ask yourself. In the same way you'll ask someone, kind of what your purpose is. I don't think there's a there's lots of ideas. Exercise is obviously one of them. For other people, it might be, I don't know, spiritual practice. For other people, it might be whittling down the to-do list. And saying, right, I've got a to-do list of 100 things. 80% of that I don't need to worry about. Or 80% of that will take me a couple of hours. Why don't I just do a couple of hours to whittle down all the nonsense admin so I can focus on it? And I just don't think there's one method, but I think it's something that, particularly as a startup, a co-founder, a leader, you need to know the answer to that question, because those moments, and obviously you need that underpinning of kind of passion for what you're doing and belief in what you're doing. But above that, you do need tools to say, right, I can feel that my energy levels are dropping. What do I need to do? What are the things that I need to do?
Exactly, because I think the really important point here is, and I'm just going to use my own experience / example on this, that when I was running Play Rugby USA, which was by all definitions a passion project, a multi-year passion project, and a super impactful one, and one I'm very proud of. Just because you're following your passions, just because you're doing something you care about, doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, to a certain extent, it makes it a lot harder, because you are so emotionally invested in it that when you come across challenges, you may have resilience to get through them, but it's very hard to separate yourself from them, because it feels like it's such an extension of you, because it is a passion. And I think that the point you made is, as a founder, you really need to know what that authentic energy is. And I actually think a lot of people don't. And I think that's exactly the starting point. And so if you can't answer that question, or where's your authentic energy come from, one of the things you can do as an example, because when I look back, I'm like, the passion wasn't enough. What happened was I ended up feeling like I was playing out of position. So if I was going to then say, well, what was my authentic energy? My authentic energy would be articulating possibilities, orchestrating people towards those, celebrating the wins like you, coaching, facilitating, building, challenging, very much people-focused progress. And when I realized that the business was at a peak and I was at the performance precipice, I was doing finances, reporting, taxes, employee paperwork, some program design, which I enjoyed, tiny bit of coaching, which I enjoyed, managing nuts and bolts of people and who was doing what, but not actually kind of facilitating and guiding and driving. And so I'd lost my authentic energy because of how I was engaging in the business. So that's why I think it's such an important question. So for folks that, if you like, don't know the answer to the question, I've got some ideas on this as well, but I'm interested in yours. What are some things they might be able to do to sort of kind of step back and work out what that is, so that they can then kind of re-engage in that authentic way that energizes them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was more a realization than something that, so you'd find yourself doing something, so for me, definitely, kind of refocusing on kind of relationships is important. The North Star, going back to what the North Star is important. Delegating, just getting back to, right, who else can do this because I need to do this, was important. But also, just going out for dinner with my team, things like that, just energize me. And it was more of a real, for me, it was less about trying to specifically answer the question, but it was more about being observant and saying, right, being aware and saying, right, actually, I can see that does that for me and that does that for me. And now I've got a toolbox.
Yes.
It wasn't a contrived toolbox. It was like, oh, I noticed that. And again, going back to COVID, which keep talking about, we were under so much kind of pressure, and it was so easy to be miserable, particularly in the first few years, that you kind of were acutely aware of when you weren't. You know what I mean? And when you were energized, oh, celebrating a win, that was good. Oh, spending time on growth. That's a big one for me. So, I'm not, I don't probably sound similar to you. I find it very good. I'm a builder. I like to build things. So I do get disillusioned if I'm doing business as usual all day.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. But you know that. So that sounds like, you know, similar to yourself. You know, that doesn't give you energy. You know.
Yeah, and I think it is exactly, it's what you said. It's observing. It's having the self-awareness. It's noticing that you're feeling that way, and then not ignoring it and just doing more of the same, but actually doing something about it. And that can be as simple as a time and energy audit, right? Literally as simple as go through a day, go through a week, look at your calendar, look back, and just score things out of 10. Did that energize me? Did it suck the life out of me? Did it energize you? Did it suck the life out of me? And from there, that gives you a barometer. From there, you can do things like, okay, well, what are the things only I can do? Everything else, an opportunity to delegate. And the things only I can do, I've really got to do. And the things that energize me, I should be doing more of because they're going to have more value. And then you start to get tactical around who's doing what, so that you can spend more time on the things where you're going to add the most value, which ultimately is in alignment with your authentic energy. And so it's a really nice tee up, because I think this energy piece is a lot of how you can bring your purpose to life. Yeah, purpose almost sits beneath that. That's the noticing part, right? Part of that is you would find it a lot easier to notice if you're out of alignment, if you had clarity on what your purpose was, right? And we talk about purpose in terms of passion plus impact plus application. I'm just interested in your view on purpose as a founder, as a co-founder, as an entrepreneur. How has that shown up for you? Whether it's shown up explicitly because you've been very clear on it, or whether it's shown up more implicitly as kind of like almost just sort of guiding you along the way a little bit. What are your views on how purpose has played its part in your journey?
I think, for me, I think purpose is really about kind of building something, you know, and leaving an impact in terms of, you know, whatever I'm putting my hand to, you know, is creating an impact. So, for example, in the education business, you know, we've put so many, you know, underprivileged children through essentially a coding curriculum that, like, well, more than coding, it gives them digital skills. You know, we do a lot of pro bono stuff for that. So there's a lot of people that have been empowered by that business. Right? You know, the sports business, we've put, you know, amazing products in the hands of, you know, Olympic athletes who've you know, won medals. So again, and then that kind of translates to inspiring people to do sport. You know, inspiring people to exercise. You know, and with Werqwise, it's all about community. So it really is. Again, I said I'm a people person. You know, I once did the Myers-Briggs, because in private equity you do a lot of, you know, psychometric testing, and all of them say I'm an extrovert, but the Myers-Briggs one, I came out 99% extrovert. So I think I'm an extreme people person. Yeah, I'm an extreme people person. And, you know, Werqwise is, you know, as well as obviously you're providing a product, but you're providing a community. You're providing a space where people feel like they're part of something bigger. And when you see that, you know, you see it a lot with our events and like the turnouts for the events, and you see it a lot through, you know, we have a mixed, you know, group of companies here. You have small startups, you have multinationals, and everything in between. And when people are asking for help, you know, unblocking each other and collaborating, you know, that feels like impact, you know. And then with APiRO, I think it's, you know, the opportunity to bring some novel technology that I do think will solve an enormous problem, both from a user perspective and an environmental perspective in the world of commercial real estate. So every single one of them is my driver from all of this activity is to try and have an impact at some sort of scale.
Yes.
And that's what I'd say. My purpose, more than kind of solving commercial real estate problems or solving sports problems, I've always been, and maybe it's the private equity background, you're just more of a generalist, really, rather than, you know, an inventor. So for me, the way I can kind of deliver that impact is through working on multiple things and helping them move forwards. And, you know, also choosing things that I think will have an impact. And I mean, that's, you know.
Yeah, so what I love, what you've done there is you've actually demonstrated exactly how our model works in terms of the passion plus impact plus application, because the application is the piece that changes. The passion plus impact, the intersection between those two things, is the thing that's pretty enduring. And that for you, if I heard you right, is something like It's building things with people that create impact and inspire people at scale. That's the essence of essentially what drives you, right? Your passion is building, being with other people, and doing that in a way that makes an impact and inspires other people that can be scaled, right? So again, major impact. And then, okay, so we've done it in education, coding and digital skills. That's inspiring those kids to take that path and creating an impact that is scalable and a skill that they can massively leverage. You've done it in the sports world by inspiring people and providing them resources to perform at their best. You're doing it now by building community, right? So they're different applications of the same purpose, which is why we work with people on articulating their purpose, because you know that you can determine the different ways you want to apply it in different areas of your life and for different seasons of time that feel like they're going to align to your authentic energy, right? If you're intentional about how you're spending your time in alignment with those things. So that's a brilliant place to get us to where we are. So with all of that said, with the experiences you've had, with this sort of application of the purpose, what are the possibilities that you see ahead now? Like, what are you pursuing? Are you excited about?
Well, I think, the one, Werqwise kind of being on almost year zero again and having the opportunity to grow in a market that I think will, move to tailwinds for Werqwise, I think is super exciting. So we are looking to open multiple locations, in San Francisco and find landlord partners. It's still not out of the woods yet because of San Francisco and how challenging San Francisco has been with commercial real estate. But I'm excited about where it can go for sure. APiRO is just the opportunity to again, we're a little startup with APiRO. So I enjoy that bit. The early business formation. We're just installing it in Telegraph Hill in San Francisco. So that's the first installation of the newer technology, the technology we're going to commercialize. We're just finishing, software, some of the software building, taking it from MVP to a product that can be given to consumers. We'll get our first data collection, like full data suite collection back. So I'm super excited about that, and I do think, I've said this a few times, I do think real estate is a bit of a sleeper when it comes to the environmental question. We shouldn't, we talk about plastic straws all day, but commercial real estate is, I think something like a third of the waste in the US is construction waste. Wow. And 90% of that is demolition. And the thing about demolishing, if you demolish a building, it's typically, kind of lived its useful life, but interiors just get knocked and thrown into landfill, knocked down and thrown into landfill, because they're typically a small part of a much bigger lease or a bigger kind of business arrangement that's happening. So it's atrocious, really, and it's a real waste of resources. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about bringing AI into APiRO and being in a position where we can, there's no reason why our system, from a voice to image perspective, couldn't simply design your office and redesign your office and work with the data it collects to suggest things. So, for example, if you get CO2 and map it across an office floor, you can see where people are and where they're not, very simply. So then you can then redesign the space. And then beyond that, there's no reason we can't then incorporate robotics to help, move the panels that we've created and move the system that we've created. At the moment, it's, a couple of lay people can do it. You don't need to be a contractor, but there's no reason why robotics couldn't do it. And that will also help because, certainly, in construction, we have a real issue in that there's not enough people to build what we need to build for the future. Mm. So, the opportunity to bring robotics to do the kind of, the more easier tasks, the more straightforward tasks is a huge opportunity for the construction industry, and one that it's embracing right now. Again, accelerated by COVID, where a lot of young people did not go into the trades in the way that they normally would. So that has kind of exacerbated a problem. So I think there's lots of things that are getting kind of solved, and I'm excited. I think it's going to be an interesting next 5 years for sure.
Oh, 100%. But it seems like you're so well positioned to be at the front of the technology and space reconfiguration, like the edge of that, right, that technology, right, and that this practical application where it's clearly going to deliver value, but the AI will be able to empower that and automate it in a very bespoke way, based upon what people are, based on the data and what people are wanting to get out of the experience is huge. So when you look at the people elements, like why you currently are, who you've got, like if you like leadership team, other folks, the hospitality folks, the people you're going to need to bring in to support the new spaces, do the sales and the business development and customer experience and all that sort of stuff. What are you looking at in terms of either some of the challenges or pain points that you're observing that you want to really prioritize, or conversely, just what are things you need to do as a leader that's going to enable your people to be able to deliver this technology and impact at scale?
Well, I think a big challenge for anyone bringing technology into commercial real estate is, it's not a fast adopter of technology as an industry. It's ripe for, I always say, if Rip Van Winkle was to wake up from his 100-year sleep, the things he'd recognize are school classrooms and the way real estate works. Landlord and tenant. It's feudal language, and we're moving away from it as an industry, but it's feudal language, right? So the big challenge will be finding, we have people who can do this, but finding more of them who can really deliver the educational sell to the landlord, because you're trying to get the landlord to move away from what they've done previously and to change their business model somewhat. And that'll involve banks too, because they finance a lot of this stuff. So there's a big education element that we need to go on, because what we're bringing to market is new and different. There is modular systems out there, no doubt, but ours is designed to be completely flexible. You can change it, weekly if you wish. So that is going to be different to get commercial real estate to spend the money on that ahead of acquiring tenants. Right? So I think it's finding the people who can really deliver the message and deliver the value to people who often wish the world is to people who they wish the world wasn't changing. Yeah, that's the challenge. They're not, because they had it. Commercial real estate has had a hell of a run. So a lot of people just want it to go back to the way it was. And they've got their kind of hands over their ears. But I don't think that'll be the case.
And what from your experience with folks, we got some folks that can do that. What's some of their secret sauce? Like what's some of whether it's characteristics or their energy or their storytelling? Like what is it they have? What attributes do they have that enable them to effectively deliver that educational sell to a landlord, to an investor, to whoever it needs to be that's involved?
I think the biggest bit is kind of intellectual flexibility, because you've got to be able to adapt your messaging to the recipient. And so what that requires is a full command of your brief. It's not, I have a certain way of saying things, I have a certain order of saying things. You will be blown off course, because you may be meeting someone who's, been in real estate a long time, the kind of archetypal, slightly grumpy, zero sum, old real estate investor, right? Or you might be meeting a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who sold his business and has now bought buildings.
Yeah.
And they require different approaches. So the big thing for me is having the intellectual flexibility to adapt the message in a way that will resonate with the person you're speaking to.
Yeah. I would follow up with you on that, because there's very, very quickly that ability to adapt. I look at, there's a couple of different models, right? Very, very simple models. So the me, we world we talked about earlier. So when you're talking about impact and you're talking about even about value, but certainly when you're talking about impact, you can ask certain questions to understand the person on the other side of the table, what drives them, what lights them up in terms of the impact they want to, right? And it could be a me impact, because very egocentric and it's about their success and everything else, and there's no right or wrong to this, it's just that's who they are, so you adopt the message to that, right? It might be about their people, their team, the opportunities it provides, that's a we. and it might be about the carbon, right, and the impact, and like not and cleaning out the landfills and doing something different because they believe they want to move more into the sort of legacy space. So now you can talk to this. So you've got a me, we world, and similarly, in the world of leadership, you've got the Telos Institute talk about as leadership aperture: narrow, medium, or wide. Wide, big systems thinking, how everything connects together. So that would align to the world approach. Medium is more strategic, so thinking slightly medium term, longer term. How does it affect the people? What are the pieces? And narrow is much more tactical, here and now. And again, humans default to one of those, and if you ask the right questions, you can understand them, then you can meet them where they're at. It might be that you need to move them, but you can meet them where they're at, right? And so it's I think that, like you called it, the intellectual flexibility, which is a really nice way of saying it, but I think there's people like, well, what do you mean, how do you actually do that? And there's a couple of really simple models around that, which are really exciting in terms of this piece, but also just for leaders and for anybody really, when you're trying to connect in a way that gets you authentically connected and enables you then to go on a journey with somebody because you've shown you understand where they're coming from.
I couldn't agree more, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And the thing about an early stage startup is you're constantly updating and articulating the messaging as well. So you're delivering it, you're kind of shaping it and improving it as you go, and then that feeds back into products, and then you keep going. And that's the fun bit. It's the iterative nature of it all is great fun. I find.
And I think that ongoing change and development and building with the people piece, right, is kind of lights you up. So we've got 5 minutes, and that means we've got to come back to you to close out. Just a couple of final questions, and I guess I've got two. I guess the first one is when you are thinking about your North Star, and we talked about me, we, world, and I'm not suggesting you have perfect statements for these, but look, when you think about your North Star, when you think about like what does inspiration and impact look like to you, what would you say? What do you want to be leaving behind?
I think you just want to kind of have touched as many people, like how I've been in a position where you've impacted as many people as possible in a positive way. And you can do that through obviously the businesses, but I also just like meeting people and managing my teams and doing all the events we do at Werqwise. And I just think there's something that I always like doing, which is I think I do it naturally, which I like seeing the best in people. And the thing about if you see the best in people, it gives them the confidence to communicate. And all of a sudden they ask for what they want, or they ask for they ask you the question they need to ask you to move forward. And so I think that that's a really important part of it. And I think like the me bit would be a desire to fulfill some sort of potential. I think the kind of the we bit is definitely kind of rewarding the people around you, the people who've come along with you for the journey, and that might be your family, friends, and all the rest of it. I think the wives of any entrepreneur suffer, or the husbands of any entrepreneurs suffer. To be the spouse in an entrepreneurial situation is not straightforward.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously the team, the people who kind of give decades of their careers to your mad idea, or your crazy plan. So there's an element on the we side to doing that, and then from the world perspective is the things that we talked about earlier, whether it's kind of putting sports equipment leading in the hands of Olympic athletes, or solving the embodied carbon problem in interiors all over the world, in office interiors all over the world, or helping underprivileged children with digital skills and helping them find a route into the modern economy. I mean, that's the world piece, I would say. So much impact you're having across all those areas, which is inspirational, and it's just awesome to see. And again, how they all come back to your purpose of building things with people that are inspiring, impacting, and have potential to scale across all sorts of different areas, which is awesome. So one parting message
right? This is for founders and people that just work in businesses and leaders and team leaders and contributors. But founders first this season, if you were kind of just leaving a message or word of wisdom to fellow founders, what would it be?
I do love like a one-liner and a piece of advice, but I think when we talked earlier about the precipice and stuff, that one thing that really helped me was when someone said to me at the point of, you know, feeling overwhelmed and taking on too much, they said to me, it's not a problem, it's just something that needs your attention. It really changed the way I thought about it all, because everything was coming to me as this with this emotional value, you know, not another issue, you know, and all of a sudden none of that was ascribed to it anymore. It was just something that needs my attention, and that helps me a lot. So I'll given the context of the conversation, that would be my advice.
I love that. That is such a perfect thing to end on. It's not a problem. It's something that needs your attention. Awesome. Well, thank you, Naveen, so much for joining me. That went super fast, for me at least.
Yeah, no,
really
me too.
enjoyed the conversation and getting to know you a bit better and all the impact you're having. Thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.